We have the equity team presentation. Dr. Lyon has a group of students and adults with her, I believe, so we'll let her kick this off.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to join my colleagues, Dr. Eryca Neville, our Director of Alternative Education and Principal at Douglas High School, Ms. Kyra Moss, student at Battle High School, and Ms. Tatiana Mays, student at Hickman High School. Together, we'd like to share some information with you about work we are doing in our school district to impact attitudes and beliefs that lead to culturally competent practice. Here is our plan for our remarks this evening. We will share our thinking first about why it is important for our system to invest in dialogue and learning about cultural competence. We will tell you what we are doing in this regard by describing the professional development that we're trained to provide. And we will share how we are delivering this learning throughout the district by introducing the equity team. It's always best to begin with why something is important. Put simply, we believe that in order to eliminate gaps in achievement and ensure the success of every single student, technical solutions are necessary but not sufficient. We are doing lots of important things in our district to open up access and opportunity for all students, like AVID that you will hear about in just a moment, and eliminating prerequisites for higher level courses, and contracting for honors. But these are generally technical changes in practice that are only half of the story. We need to examine our individual beliefs about learning and our expectations for ourselves and our students. We've done a lot of work this year about the idea of mindsets, using the book by Carol Dweck that Dr. Belcher gave to every administrator last fall. We need to have a growth mindset about ourselves and about student learning. The conviction that hard work and practice and good teaching are what causes learning, and not fixed characteristics. Those beliefs lead to the idea that effort is what causes achievement. Smart isn't what you are, it's what you become. So you've seen this diagram before. This is our logic model for the idea that culturally competent beliefs and practices can improve the quality and effectiveness of all of our practices. On the left side of this picture, as you look at the screen, you see a list of the critical ingredients of effective schools. Teaching and learning using a rigorous curriculum with aligned assessments and intervention for students who both need remediation and enrichment, student support in the three-tier model, family and community involvement, and a diverse and highly effective staff. These are the things, mostly technical in nature, that cause learning. On the right of the picture, you see the exact same list, except that they are in different colored boxes because they've been filtered through the lens of culturally competent beliefs and practices. The picture is meant to symbolize that how we do what we do matters. So we said what is on the district is shown in the box on the lower right. We can provide the tools that our schools and programs can use to foster conversations and learning by providing a curriculum that helps us to examine issues of social justice and culturally competent practice with people who are trained to lead these kinds of courageous conversations and professional development settings. We can also provide schools and programs with survey and audit tools, with data analysis, all of which can help them understand where they are in the journey and plan their path. And what is the responsibility in our model of the schools and programs is to create and implement a long-term plan for this learning in an environment of trust and psychological safety. Our school leadership teams can make a long-term plan about how they can best lead this learning using district tools in their professional learning community. For years, we've done what I call episodic acts of equity. We've brought in fabulous speakers, often speakers we've learned of through our involvement in Minority Student Achievement Network, and we've done administrative book studies. And I don't mean to say that these things don't cause learning and change hearts and minds. They do. But they weren't systematic. We weren't seeing the impact that we seek. We needed the internal capacity to lead and facilitate this work continuously and consistently, even relentlessly. over time. In order to bring the capacity to lead the work in-house, then, we've partnered with the National Conference for Community and Justice of Metropolitan St. Louis, a small not-for-profit community agency that leads this work, mostly in the St. Louis area. They work with education, healthcare, and the private sector to develop programs that address bias and discrimination. These simple statements represent the basic tenets of the social justice curriculum that we have learned and are now sharing. People are not born with prejudice. Prejudice and bias are learned through experience. We are all members of many social identity groups based on race, gender, ethnicity, class, age, ability, sexual orientation, religion, and others. In our society, members of some groups experience privilege and advantage, while others are at a disadvantage. As a white person, for instance, I enjoy advantages in our society that I take for granted. As a female, I have experienced attitudes and behaviors in my life that have occasionally put me at a disadvantage in either social or professional settings. And these advantages and disadvantages occur at individual, institutional, and societal levels. This is really a systemic, multidimensional issue. The thoughts and beliefs that we have each learned through a lifetime of socialization impact our attitudes and our behaviors, and they happen at both conscious and unconscious levels. Mostly, overt racism and sexism, for instance, are less common in our community, although they do exist. But unconscious attitudes and behaviors that advantage some people over others can still happen, again, at both institutional and individual levels. One researcher we have worked with through the Minority Student Achievement Network calls these things microaggressions, when we inadvertently, unconsciously think things or do things that are prejudiced, or when we fail to examine our institutions and our systems to be sure that we are providing the same access and opportunity to all. So our theory of change is this: by providing systemic, long-term professional development in a safe and nurturing way over time, addressing cultural competence from a framework that locates these issues as systemic, we will raise awareness and skills for understanding identity, privilege, and oppression. And if we do that, then those involved in education will better understand the role of difference in interactions between students, families, and the system around not just race, but also class, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and other identity areas. And then we will create the necessary preconditions for improved cultural literacy in individual relationships and interactions. We will eliminate bias in adult-student partnerships and empower relationships with students and families. So professional development will lead to understanding and learning, which will lead to individual change, that will lead to systems change. The elimination of institutionalized sources of inequity by providing better access to educational content and eliminating opportunity and enrichment gaps, which will result in the elimination of the achievement gap and improved achievement for all. So to begin that change, we got trained. The NCCJ website, in speaking about the Facilitator Certification Program, which is what that acronym stands for, and that's what the adults on the team have been through. Their website says, quote, "The ability for organizations to address diversity in sustained and meaningful ways depends on their level of skills. It does not just happen by accident." To develop these skills, a team of district leaders has gone through a total of 10 days of training with NCCJ. The training begins with a 3-day retreat where we explore our own identities and attitudes and beliefs, followed by a total of 7 days of training over the course of several months, in which we continue learning about our own journeys and also develop the skills to facilitate these conversations with others here in our district. We learned about things like creating psychological safety for participants to explore difficult topics, and ways to use listening and questioning carefully to help people in their own reflection and learning. Here you can see the names and roles of our adults and the schools represented by our students. You can see that we represent a pretty diverse group, both in our own social identities and in our job roles in the district. And we are all people who are doing this work in addition to being students or in addition to our day jobs, because we believe it is so important. And then we got really excited about bringing student perspectives and wisdom into our work starting last summer. I'd like to invite Kyra and Tatiana to share some of that.
Okay. The adults went to FTCP training and the students went to Anytown. Anytown was an 8-day and 7-night program. We lived on the campus of the University of Missouri St. Louis, and we were there with a bunch of strangers who ended up being our friends after the days of camp went by. We had no contact with the outside world. We didn't have phones or internet. We had a microwave, but we didn't know what time it was, so we had to kind of guess. It was exciting. It was a really unique and powerful program. It taught us a lot about how to be effective leaders in an all-inclusive world and including everyone, and it was really great. She can tell you more.
And not only that, but to piggyback off of what Kyra was saying, to coincide with the experience there, although it was overwhelming and emotional and things like that, it was an overall great experience. We got to learn things about ourselves as well as learning things about one another, things that I wouldn't know about Kyra, although she went to the same exact school as me at that time. So being able to come back home and, bringing it back home, I don't know, like listening to the music that I listen to and movies that I watch and ways that my friends or my family and I, that we talk to each other, the way that we joke around, all that stuff, it kind of changed. It didn't change in a bad way. It didn't change in a way that I wouldn't want it to change. It actually all changed for the better. Although it was difficult, like they kept telling us, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. I had to trust the process, and it ended up working out pretty well. This table that you see with the chair next to it is representing an opportunity gap. We came up with this table based off of some of the ideas that we learned at the Anytown camp, and I'll let her label the table before I explain it.
The top of the table was the opportunity gap, and we're trying to break the table down. Prejudice is something we deal with, so it's one of the legs that's keeping the opportunity gap table standing. Knowledge, money, and resources are all things that we are lacking, so they are things that are holding the table up. And the chair sitting outside of the table is the motivation you need to get to the table to even start breaking down the legs of the table.
And I guess I'll start with the chair first. The chair, that obviously represents motivation, are for students or even teachers or faculty of CPS, like Kyra and I, that, we need to get to that table. But obviously the chair is away from the table. We need to get to the opportunity gap there so that we can start breaking down the legs. And the way that the reason why they use the table in the first place is to represent the fact that prejudice, which is something that we deal with every day, if we get rid of prejudice, we're still lacking resources, money, and knowledge. So that table is still going to stand. Regardless if you get rid of one leg, you have to knock down all of the legs for the table to fall at all. Resources and money, for example, those are diagonal from one another. The table is still going to stand based off of lack of knowledge, which is a reason for prejudice in the first place. So in order to knock down this opportunity gap, in order to get rid of it, students like Kyra and I and the adults of the equity team come together and work together so that we can get rid of things like that. And some of the ways that we do that are as student advocates.
We had an adult and young person retreat, which had the students that went to Anytown and some of the faculty that went through the FTCP training. We had a retreat at Stony Creek where we all met together and kind of discussed each other's experiences and how we see it, because teachers and students or counselors and principals, we all see things differently. So it was kind of helped us see what each other were seeing, for lack of a better word. That was kind of confusing. But it helped a lot because they understood where we were coming from after having a chance to actually talk to them about it. Because in Anytown, we talked to all students. So a lot of us had the same views. And with the training for the teachers, they probably didn't know where we were coming from. So that gave us a chance to meet together and share opinions.
One unique experience that I got was to go in front of, I guess, third-year teachers, and basically they asked a lot of questions on how they could better themselves as teachers, as well as help me as a student, or students just like me. And we always get told to speak in I form, and I personally gave them ways that would help me, which I know would help other students that were just like me and things like that, and dealing with the things that I deal with, and as well as students who aren't like me. I can't say that I can personally speak for them, but I do talk with a lot of students that aren't like me, and getting their ideas and being able to take that to adults to better themselves as well as better help their students.
And we're organizing our student conference, the Max Scholars Failure is Not an Option Conference. In our sessions, we're incorporating a lot of the things that we learned in Anytown and in the training into the session, so we can kind of get it out to more people, because we can't send everybody to Anytown at once, and not every teacher is going to go through the training. But the Failure is Not an Option Conference has a lot of people coming to it, so it kind of gets the word out there, gets more people thinking about it, and gets more people involved in wanting to do these things.
And lastly, Kyra already touched on it before. The adults and young persons retreat, bring that all together to combine one equity team to continue.
Okay, so one of the unique things about this training is that once you are finished, we refer to ourselves as facilitator-trainers, because it's not just about going through the training and walking away, but they also work to make sure that you can continue the work wherever you take back to your home environments. So you are seeing facilitator-trainers. That was the first time I heard that term. And in that, we have put together a host of menu opportunities or possibilities to go back and continue the work within Columbia Public Schools. So you see the list that's up. Faculty meeting presentations are available. We can do consultations with school plans. We'll talk about that in a bit. We've created a full day in service, which is called the BIC trainings, and that is Building Inclusive Communities, which is a host of different activities and theory pieces that we go back and offer over a one-day session. You can get targeted professional development for leadership teams, and we'll talk a bit about that in just a second. Book studies, series of professional development sessions throughout the school year. We could offer you a 2-day retreat and also infuse the work within new teacher induction, the new teacher induction curriculum. So far, within Columbia Public Schools, we've had the pleasure and opportunity of working with over 400 CPS employees. And I have to tip my hat to Dr. Belcher, because he was the first one to go back and initiate the work and allowing us to work with the cabinet. So we did a series of training sessions with the superintendent's cabinet, which was a nice time commitment and let you know how important that work was considered, to start with the top and then continue to infuse it throughout the school districts. Out of that, Dr. Yoakum went and stepped up and talked about wanting to include the secondary principals and assistant principals to also go through that. So we work with, this year, all secondary principals and assistant principals. We've had the opportunity to work with secondary counselors. Last summer was the beginning of BICS, the 3 Building Inclusive Communities, which was open to all CPS employees to come in and experience for a one-day session that gave you a nice overview of a lot of the concepts that we went through in our intensive training. A leadership retreat and shared planning sessions out at Rockbridge High School came out of this, and there is currently a faculty meeting series going on at Gentry Middle School. So once again, we've had the opportunity to work with over 400 CPS employees. One of the wonderful things, and I'm going to put all 3 up, at looking at where do we go next, we got the opportunity to do the retreat that the young lady spoke of, and it was all FTCP, the adults that have been trained, along with those students that have been with the Anytown retreat. And it was the first time we got students and the adults going together and getting an opportunity to share one another's points of view. So together as a collective, we were able to come up with what should be our next goals and steps. So the 3 things that came out of that work were collaboration, communication, and the sustainability factor. The collaboration piece is that we want to intentionally make sure that adults and students that have been trained get the opportunity to work together. And we're currently kind of complementing one another's work. As some of the ladies spoke about, they had the opportunity to speak to third-year teachers. We, as adults, are supporting their work and creating sessions to go back with this. The failure is not an option conference, but we want to go back and make a collective so that we can do trainings with students and adults going out together as teams. The next piece is the communication. Coming out of our secondary principals work, the equity team is going to work with all secondary administrators over the summer to create equity plans within their buildings, letting them take the lead after they've been through 1 year of training to see what they would think would be the next step within their respective environments. And finally, the sustainability factor. We want to continue to go back and offer training to both adults and youth through FTCP and the Anytown trainings offered through NCJJ STL. So, I also forgot to mention back in communication that we're also going to work with the elementary principals starting this fall. So, do you have any questions, thoughts?
Yeah. This is amazing. Spreading this through the Columbia Public Schools framework is obviously priority number one. But just listening to you and listening to the clear level of inspiration that this has provided, is there any possible way that this is something that can translate outside of CPS and into the community with these students' parents and families? I mean, it seems to me that being able to have that reflected back outside of our buildings and outside of our structures that we have internally would be extraordinary in battling the achievement gap and dealing with something outside of the bells. Is that something that would be possible, do you think, in the future?
I'd respectfully submit, not to speak for the group, that anything is possible. It's just a matter of going back in. And one of the things that I was looking forward to seeing was to see the part about secondary administrators, to see if they saw the need to also infuse that throughout their school communities, not just in terms of internal, but that external piece too, because at the end of the day, we're all one big family. So to see how they wanted to conceive it that way. But we're also open to any other CPS entities that want, even the board, if you all are interested, to go back in and create that and include that piece throughout. So
I
we
have
can
a couple of
one
comments
page.
I might add to that. We're very specifically allowed to be agency trainers. We were trained by NCCJ, and we can only train within Columbia Public Schools. However, I got special permission last summer from them to invite leadership from the United Way, who came and joined us at one of our BICs to begin that possibility of this becoming not only a Columbia Public Schools tool, but a community tool. It's also very exciting that we are being co-trained as facilitators with leaders at University of Missouri Medical School. And so I'm feeling excited about the possibility that we could even begin co-training with NCCJ's not only permission but support in both a healthcare and an education setting, and that would be another way to begin to make this a community conversation. The last thing I'd share is that I met recently with Mr. Robert Ross and the Minority Men's Network in order to share some of this and just get his initial thinking. So we really need to solidify, I think, what we're doing internally and
Sure.
and also think about that vision.
Any other questions? Nice job, ladies.
Each building is developing their own plan and how they're going to approach this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, kind of what we're saying now is what's, for the secondary system, where the leadership team has been through the training, what we're saying is we'll use our, allow us to be consultants to come and work with you to put together a long-term plan. And what's tight is everybody will have a plan. What's by definition the building leadership team's opportunity is to say what that plan will look like. How often will we train? When will we train? In what conditions? Do we want to do a lot of work in the summer? Do we want to do it in hour snippets during the year? So forth and so on. And then starting that same cycle with elementary next year.
Right, okay.
Do you get any pushback on any of this? Is everybody so politically correct that at least they're willing to have the conversation, or are there still some people that are uncomfortable with this?
Anytime you bring up any form of oppression, whether it be race, gender, ethnicity, whatever it may be, people are always uncomfortable. People are always uncomfortable to lean into it, whether we're reading a book in the classroom or we're talking about it in a setting like this. It's always that discomfort there. And what we do as an equity team is we lean into that discomfort. Not all of us are comfortable all the time with the subjects that are brought up. And every day it's something new. No matter what is said from one of the students or what is said from one of the adults. It's never, I don't want to say it's never going to be comfortable. It's never going to be a comfortable subject when you're bringing up any form of oppression, but we're working on it. So.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.